Good to have you 3 and Out here on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Hope you had a great weekend. Glad we are able to be here with you. Thanks for making us a part of your day. College football never ceases to amaze, BJ and Ben. It's something new every single week, and we continue to get it shaped week in and week out. Oregon just gets absolutely blasted there by Utah. That'll certainly shake up the college football playoff rankings. We know Ohio State and Michigan are going to play this week. That'll shake some things up. Alabama and Auburn, could that shake some things up? We'll have to wait and see, but a lot to get to here on the show. Coming up in the final hour, we'll chat with Josh Pate, 247 Sports. Also, Chris Gordy, locked on the SEC podcast and Sports Talk 790 in Houston. We're talking SEC football with him. Also, David Waters, Gators Breakdown, will join us here in about 30 minutes on the show. And Brooks Austin, his weekly Monday hit from Dogs Daily on SI. He will join us. So we're talking Georgia football, but certainly it is not just your typical Monday, BJ and Ben. Dan Mullen fired there at Florida. You're hearing rumblings or rumors potentially at Auburn that they might have a coaching change, not because of a firing, but because a lot of jobs are open on the West Coast potentially. So, wow, where to start on a Monday? Let's start there with Dan Mullen out at Florida. Ben, as someone who played for the Gators program, you lose in overtime. They make the decision on Sunday to move on from Dan Mullen. He's going to get $6 million within the next 30 days and then $1 million a year for the next 6 years from Florida. Your thoughts on Dan Mullen moving on?
BJ, something me and you talked about before the show, right? I asked you something, and you said something that shocked me. But I said, why did Texas A&M hire Jimbo Fisher? You said to make them nationally relevant. And when I think about it, I'm like, yeah. The more I think about it, I'm like, yeah. Did Dan Mullen make Florida nationally relevant? Yes, but that's not what they hired him for. They hired him to try to get back to winning consistently and to potentially win the East and start competing for national championships. Now, Dan Mullen went to back-to-back New Year's Six Bowls. That's to be celebrated. But I always remember who Dan Mullen replaced. Jim McElwain. I mean, I cannot deny or validate the things that Jim McElwain was saying, but I told you this, Kevin and BJ. When you start having on Darth Vader outfits, you start starting fights right before halftime, you're not the most personable person in the press conferences, and you're losing, something has to give. Perception and reputation might be bigger at these big programs than winning, because it's what the national narrative is about you as well as what you're actually doing. And Florida's losing on both ends. You go back to the Missouri game, you got over a minute left, you can go down and potentially kick the game with a field goal, and you play for overtime and you lose. You score 42 points against LSU, but you give up 49. You can't get a 2-point conversion against Alabama, and you lose. You just lay an egg right before the half against Georgia, and I don't know who that Florida team was against South Carolina. You add that to the last 3 games of 2020. Talk about the bowl game. You talk about LSU. You talk about the SEC championship game, and then you start saying, okay, what coach are we dealing with? I think you're dealing with both. I think you're dealing with the guy that's good enough to take you to New Year's Six Bowls, but you're also dealing with a guy that can't win games he should win, and when it comes to crunch time, he's not built for it. So I understand. Dan Mullen is a really, really good coach. I am not here to I'm not one of the people. He's not the worst, but you got to take the bitter with the sweet. I'm not piling on, but I have spoken to people that have worked with him and say he is hard to deal with. Scott Strickland had to make a decision. And right now, Scott Strickland's biggest decision thus far is hiring Dan Mullen. We'll see who he's going to get, but for my money, it's the University of Florida can't be 2-9 in their last 11 games or what may have you. And
that's against the Power 5.
I'm sorry, against P5. And since Dan Mullen has been there, he's won the East one time. He's been to one the SEC championship game. He's played Alabama very well, but in between those times, hasn't been much to talk about, against Georgia, because he went 1-3 against Georgia. You haven't. I mean, you went. I think he's going 0-4 against LSU, if I'm not mistaken. So it's so many things to throw around. But I think at the end of the day, when the perception battle is being lost, when Florida and Florida State are both 5 or 6, the brawl for it all on Saturday. I mean, it's for me, BJ. The national narrative has more to do with with public perception around town, and right now Dan Mullen was losing both.
Yeah, and I think the record you mentioned is what's really startling, right? Because you think about Florida, and even if the Gators aren't competing for national championships like they were, during the Urban Meyer era, you still expect Florida to be one of the better teams in the SEC year in and year out. I mean, to me, and Ben, maybe this isn't fair, but when I think about a quote rebuilding year at Florida, I think 8-4. I mean, maybe 7-5, and you start talking about 2-9 in your last 11 Power 5 games. Now, granted, you played Alabama a couple of times in there. You played, LSU a couple of times. But to have struggles that are that significant, I'm amazed at how quickly this soured, right? Because go back to last year. Last year, late in the season, Florida was at least in the mix for the college football playoff. They then played Alabama to a 6-point game. That was a one-score game where Alabama had to recover an onside kick. And then you think about what happened this year. And Ben, you mentioned, the Missouri finish was kind of crazy. You had sort of like a broken play on a 2-point conversion, and the quarterback threw it up and there were no defenders there. To me, that wasn't the low point. I think even getting past the Samford game, which was really bad in the first half, I think what happened at South Carolina was really eye-opening, where you didn't see Florida play competitively. You didn't see the Gators respond to adversity. There didn't seem to be a sense of urgency. And I think from the outside looking in, I know there have been frustrations for some time, but I think from the outside looking in, you're looking at that game going, this South Carolina team's done a good job this year, but they're not on the same level as Florida talent-wise, and Florida's getting dismantled in every aspect of the game. So surprising how fast this happened. Not that it happened, because you compile it all together, Kevin, and you kind of see the trajectory going downwards. And I'm not an expert on recruiting, but recruiting has not been going well compared to what you would normally expect at Florida. I'm not surprised a change was made, Kevin, but if you would have told me this time last year that this was going to happen, I'd have been like, what are you talking about? Florida's a top 10 team. They're in the SEC championship game. So it's amazing how it all kind of came together.
Yeah, it really spiraled down quickly. And I saw a thing, I think Florida, or Dan Mullen, not Florida, but Dan Mullen is like the fifth coach to get fired a year after going to the SEC championship game. He joins the likes of Philip Fulmer, who took Tennessee to the SEC championship game and then was fired the year after that. So not unprecedented, but again, you're talking about a pretty precipitous slide here, where last year you're saying, man, this Florida team is loaded. They played Alabama to within a touchdown in the SEC championship game, and then you come back and say, man, this team might be headed somewhere, and now they're fighting for bowl eligibility going into the last week of the regular season. That is a pretty far slide. I know, Ben, kind of hearing what people say, Dan Mullen's strong suit isn't necessarily recruiting. It is, player development. Hey, I can get the guys in and I can coach them up. That's his kind of, that's what he's known for, not necessarily recruiting. But I think if you're Dan Mullen, if you know that going in, you better surround yourself with guys who are recruiting beasts and recruiting animals, and guys who love to get out there and go get guys and let Dan. I mean, again, we've seen guys be able to do this where you're the closer, right? Hey, I'm Dan Mullen. I don't like to recruit. Hey, who are the guys that we're after? Bring me in and let me just seal the deal. I don't have to go out there and woo, like he's already on the fence. Let me just go in and finish the deal and sell them on Florida. Keep it as simple as that. But again, when you are getting out recruited in the SEC, it shows. And again, I think you look at just take a look at what's happened. Georgia's out recruited everybody in the East, and they are running laps and circles around them. I think the closest, who is second East, got 3-4 losses behind Georgia. So I mean, everybody in the East is struggling. And if you're Florida, you're saying, look, preseason, it was clear cut at worst, number 2 behind Georgia. And now may not make a bowl game. That's a far cry. But again, Dan Mullen out. Don't know how soon he'll get back into coaching. But Ben, we'll get into this a little bit later in the show as well. But I'm not going to ask you to throw a name out there. But who is the right guy? No, not necessarily. I mean, you can give me a name if you like, but who is the right guy to step in at Florida? Because people say, well, it's talent-rich state. Should be able to you should be able, anybody who's halfway motivated and competent should be able to come in and do an okay job. But who's the right guy to fit that culture, that university, to try to turn it around?
Well, it just, man, that's a hard question to answer because it depends on what you want. Do you want a Dan Mullen type who's going to make Florida nationally relevant, or do you want an Urban Meyer or Steve Spurrier? Like, you got to think about the coaches since 2000, right? Florida's getting ready to have coach number 7, I think. So you went from Spurrier to Zook to Meyer to Muschamp to McElwain to Mullen. So you got to ask yourself, you had 2 really, really good Hall of Famers in there, but you had some duds in between. And I think that's the thing, BJ, is that's the hardest thing in sports. Who is the right guy, right? Florida State, who's the right guy? Miami, who's the right guy? Florida, who's the right guy? I don't think that Dan Mullen was the wrong guy. I just think that sometimes you have to be in that seat to realize, dude, yeah, man, it's easy when you got one side of the ball, but you also had Tim Tebow. You also had Percy Harvin. You also had the Pouncer twins. You had a lot of guys to help that offense go. What happens when you don't have those guys? So, I mean, I'm gonna give you my picks later on, but I think the right guy, Kevin, comes back to, if you talking about national championships, I don't know if he's out there. Because, I mean, I've only seen Florida win 3, and 2 of them, BJ, came within a 3-year span. So I don't know who's the right for national championships. He might not exist, or he might currently have a job. But as far as like winning that perception battle and keeping Florida right there with Georgia, I think that guy's out there, because you got to win the perception battle and you got to be able to compete in Jacksonville year in and year out. Because right now, I mean, I don't even go to the Florida-Georgia game no more, or Georgia-Florida to you Georgia fans, not because I think Florida's going to lose, because I know they are. I don't want to be there for that. I don't want to try to be professional up there in that box. And I got to deal with them Georgia beat writers. That's another conversation for another day. But BJ, as far as like the guy who's out there, I think there's guys that's out there. But to be on the Saban and Smart and Ohio State, those type level, now that makes it even harder, So we'll see. But I don't know if that guy is out there right now.
Yeah, but I've heard a lot of, oh man, it's a crowded coaching market. How's Florida? It's the University of Florida. This is one of the elite jobs. With all due respect to other jobs, this is probably at worst a top 3 or 4 job in all of college football. And you can make a strong argument it's the best job in all of college football. So I think if you're Florida, yes, you have championship expectations. You have expectations to be a consistent contender. And I think those are realistic expectations. Everybody says that, but there are probably only, I don't know, a dozen or so schools that probably have that reality. Florida does. So I expect Florida, you'll see rumors around big names. You'll see rumors around big salaries. And I think all that is viable at this point, Kevin.
Yeah, and again, there's a bunch of names being thrown out there. We'll get to some of those that we've at least seen mentioned and how realistic some of those might be. We'll chat with David Waters, Gators Breakdown, coming up in about 20 minutes here on the show. But when we return, we were scheduled to chat with Brooks Austin. I've got a note. We're going to move Brooks a little bit later back in the show. So he'll join us in hour number 2. Have a little fun here on a Monday as we get ready for Thanksgiving week. But it's also rivalry week around college football. We'll hit that next. Have a little fun with Rivalry Week here on 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you back here, 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. We'll hear from David Waters, Gators Breakdown, coming up in just a little bit. We'll talk about the latest there around Florida. Dan Mullen's firing and who might be a candidate there. All kinds of names floating around there in Gainesville. We'll talk to him about that in just a little bit. Brooks Austin will join us in hour number 2, and it is rivalry week in college football. BJ, you got all your in-state rivalry games going on, and you thought we'd have a little fun with rivalry week. That's a mouthful to say, and see how much Ben and I pay attention.
All right, now not all of these rivalries are this weekend, but this is the rivalry week where you celebrate those games and those series. So what we're going to do here, Christian and I were talking about this earlier and doing some research. This is not name that team. This is name those teams. I'm going to give you a rivalry name, a name of a rivalry trophy. So this is a trophy that you get for winning the rivalry. These are very famous throughout college football. All of these are Division I trophies, and theoretically, you have the chance to get 2 points if you get both correct. So we're going to do it the same way. I will name the trophy. You guys will jump in and say it. Kevin, that means be aggressive, get after it here, okay? And I have 15 rivalry trophies. We will see how many of those y'all can get 1 or potentially 2 correct answers with. So are you guys ready?
I mean,
as ready as we're going to be.
15?
That was not exactly all inspiring.
No,
all right.
There's a total of 30 possible points.
Okay.
Total of 30 possible points. All right. At first, number 1, Golden Egg.
Shoot. Mississippi State
No,
and Ole Miss.
Yes, that was not a very impressive effort for one that I thought would be super easy.
Listen, for those of you who don't know, Kevin doesn't Kevin. I know the answer. I can't do it.
No, I was sitting there like we went over these and BJ and it's like no cheating, but there's 15. So I'm looking. I'm like, Kevin was not on the list.
Kevin goes, oh yeah. BJ goes,
wait. So are you saying maybe you did a little pre-preparation?
No, I did no research. I'm just saying. I'm trying to think about him, and I was like, that's not one that was there. So
well, maybe
that was my first reaction. Was that's not one we talked about? But okay.
Maybe you shouldn't use the show notes for kind of pre-prep. All right, moving forward. The Iron Skillet. You win the Iron Skillet.
The Iron Skillet. That sounds like an out west, like frontiersman type thing. We're cooking in an iron skillet. I'm going to say, before Ben can jump in, I guess, what? UTEP, UTSA. I don't know.
Good guess, but the points are still available here, Ben.
Iron skillet sound like Minnesota. I don't know. Utah.
Okay, correct answer is SMU, TCU for the Iron Skillet. SMU and TCU. We move forward here. The Old Brass Spittoon.
What? The old what?
Is that Wyoming and Nevada?
No. Good guess, Ben. The Old Brass Spittoon.
Like what? West Virginia. And
just by themselves, or
West Virginia and University of Miami, Ohio.
All right, correct answer: Indiana versus Michigan State for the Old Brass Spittoon. We are talking about rivalry trophy names. Ben currently has 2. Kevin has 0. All right, gentlemen, an interesting one here: the Okefenokee Or.
Florida, Georgia.
That is correct. And Christian and I, no, we were doing research. No, Ben, apparently this is fairly new, apparently. Fairly new.
This is the only reason why I know that, right? When growing up, my granddad would always tell me, oh, yeah, he said them Georgia Okefenokee boys. And when I got to Florida, I had some of them coaches hit me with the old Ben, you want to know some of the history of this game? And I used to be like, no, because they're going to still tell me. I do remember that. I shouldn't remember that, but I do remember that. Yes.
Yeah, apparently not a well-known fact that Florida and Georgia
very much not a well-known fact.
The Okefenokee Or. All right, here we are. Ben's at 4.
So shout out to my granddaddy. Still help me get some points. Not to win, granddaddy. We'll see at the end.
Well, Ben's at 4, Kevin's at 0 as we try to guess the two teams who play for these rivalry trophies. All right, the Platypus Trophy.
The platypus. A platypus is an animal, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I got one of these correct.
The platypus.
Yeah. Where would there even be platypuses to make a trophy? Let's see here.
Utah State.
Illinois and Iowa.
Wow. Okay. The correct answer is Oregon and Oregon State play for the Platypus Trophy. Oregon and Oregon State, of course. All right. We're at Ben 4, Kevin 0. Okay.
So I guess the Oregon State Beavers and the Ducks play for a Platypus Trophy. That's
doesn't that make sense? Okay. Here we go, Kevin. Kevin, you got to get some traction here. The Old Oaken Bucket.
The what?
That is
the Old Oaken Bucket.
It's Old Oaken Bucket. That is Michigan and Wisconsin.
No, Ben, a chance to add to your lead.
I'm so bad. Play for
wait. Because there's one that
it's a bucket. It's old and it's made of oak.
Wait a minute.
No, and you joke about that. I actually was reading about the trophy. Apparently, it is old, and B, it is oak.
Okay, here come the weirdness. BJ, if I get this, man, you're gonna have to give me some extra points. I thought it was, man. It's something that ain't got nothing to do with like those type like cities on thing. It's shoot. It's Arizona State and Arizona.
That was a lot of effort for being way off. The correct answer.
You know what? That's your problem right there.
The correct answer is Indiana and Purdue play for the Old Oaken Bucket. The Old Oaken Bucket. Okay, we move forward. Kevin, you are trailing 4-0. Floyd of Rosedale. Rosedale.
That's not a real thing.
The what?
You play for a trophy called Floyd of Rosedale.
Oh man, that's Yale versus Dartmouth.
Okay.
Cal and Stanford.
You think Cal and Stanford play for? Okay, the correct answer. The correct answer is Iowa and Minnesota play for Floyd of Rosedale.
You don't get to patronize
Iowa and Minnesota. All right,
what
here
is
we go.
The Floyd of Rosedale?
Listen, this is a very famous college football trophy. Paul Bunyan's axe.
Wisconsin and Minnesota.
Yes, and Kevin is on the board in resounding fashion. Ben 4, Kevin 2, as we play a little name those teams, rivalry trophies. So now it's close. We have, let's see, about a half dozen left. All right, Kevin, are you ready? Because this is, are you ready for where we are here?
Yeah.
The Golden Boot.
LSU, Arkansas.
And there it is. We are now tied. The drama is overwhelming. And name those teams. Yes. I was really worried after your struggles with the first one, Kevin. Okay. 4-4. The Bourbon Barrel. The Bourbon Barrel.
Kentucky.
Louisville, Kentucky.
I will give you one. It is Kentucky. They do not play Louisville. And actually, Ben, you said it kind of at the same time. Maybe I'll give both of y'all one.
I appreciate that, man.
It was pretty close. I feel like it was pretty close. Plus, Kevin, technically, you said Louisville first, which was wrong. And I'm kind of, you shouldn't get any points, but I'll give you one.
Well, they make bourbon in Kentucky, so I'd like to see who the other answer is.
Well, Ben, do you have a guess?
Wait a minute.
Got to get to it here.
I
He doesn't
I
know.
don't know.
All right. That was impressive. It's Kentucky and Indiana. We got to move through these quickly. I'll give both of y'all one there just because I'm a nice guy. 5-5. The Chancellor's Spurs.
Texas Tech.
Very impressive. Well done. Kevin got both. Ben, you're now trailing 7-5. Kevin, how did you know that? That was pretty.
I mean, where else is the Spur going to be? It's
Yeah,
gonna be somewhere
Spurs,
in
you got the
Texas.
Longhorns
Pretty
and the
impressive.
Raiders. They both were.
All right. We got 4 left, 8 possible points. The War on I-4 trophy.
Central Florida,
Turn
South
UCF.
Florida.
I think Kevin's on top of it. Kevin now with what? 9. Ben, you're at 5. Kevin's at 9, maybe pulling away here. All right, we have 3 more left. Ben, you have to finish strong. Name those teams. The Apple Cup.
Washington State.
Oh, man. Kevin's starting to pull away and assert his dominance here.
Hold on, I said Washington State, though.
No. I mean,
We said it at the same time.
sort of. No. He said it, and then you said it. All right,
No,
Ben. I'm
no,
gonna try to help you out.
State.
He's laughing. I'm gonna try to help. Black Diamond Trophy.
Colorado State.
No, I know this one.
No.
I know this one. Wait a minute. West Virginia
Yes.
and Virginia Tech.
Yes. Very impressive. Although you were mathematically eliminated, you literally don't have a chance to win, but that was still very impressive. So to make it,
you tell me what I don't got. You just
I'm just saying. Listen, to make it closer, finally the Big Dog Trophy.
Y'all said one was literally new and like made up. I'm going to go with the one that UConn made up and make it UConn and Central Florida.
I like the guess, but no, Ben.
Big Dog Trophy.
The Big Dog Trophy. The Heisman. Arizona State.
That is your second guess for Arizona State. Neither of which, well, they're not dogs. Correct answer: Citadel and Wofford, the Bulldogs and the Terriers. Citadel and Wofford. Final score: Kevin 11, Ben 7. Name those teams. Well done, gentlemen.
I feel lied to. Said D1 FBS championship. Anyway, that being said,
whoa. Citadel and Wofford aren't D1. Citadel and Wofford aren't D1.
I thought it was FBS. That distinction was made. That's okay. David Waters, Gators Breakdown, will join us when we come back. Good to have you back here, 3 and Out on this Monday. A change there in Gainesville. Dan Mullen is out. He will get $6 million within the next 30 days and $1 million a year for the next 6 years. Joining us here on the program to help us talk all about that, our good friend from Gators Breakdown, David Waters, joins us here on 3 and Out. David, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good, guys. How about you?
Doing good. Surprise level, I guess, that this happened on Sunday, maybe not after Florida State, or if they would have won against Florida State. How surprised were you that this happened on Sunday?
From beginning of the season, very surprised. But then as the season played out, not too surprised. After that loss to South Carolina a couple weeks ago, I didn't think Dan Mullen could afford another loss on the season. And then you had the very close game versus FCS Stanford last week. That probably plays into the decision a bit too. But either way, I still thought if Dan Mullen could beat Missouri and beat FSU, then I thought it was a 50-50 shot that he'd be back next year. But then losing to Missouri, overtime fashion, of course, this week, it was the final straw. It looked like for Scott Strickland to go ahead and make the move and for to go ahead and get these coaching sweepstakes that LSU and USC is, for big programs already in. And so not too surprised after that South Carolina game that there was another loss along the way. I thought this might happen.
Dave, I was surprised that Florida and Dan Mullen didn't try to go down the field late in the fourth quarter of the Missouri game. Let's say Florida gets a field goal, or let's say even the 2-point conversion try isn't converted for Missouri. If Florida wins, even in ugly fashion, is Dan Mullen still the head coach today?
I believe he is. I think it would have taken a loss no matter how Florida would have won the game. I still think he'd be head coach. And look, I mean, just that drive you're talking about at the end of the game, I mean, that's kind of a symptom of this season. You go back to earlier in the season versus Kentucky as well, right before halftime. Florida sat on the ball in a very close game, didn't try to push the ball down the field. But then with kind of the season, well, not really the season, but maybe his job on the line, decides to go kind of conservative again, and probably didn't trust his fourth-year quarterback, Emory Jones, probably didn't trust the offensive line to protect Emory Jones. He didn't trust his offense to go make a play, try to go win the game. And you kind of saw it play out in overtime, going for that 2-point conversion. Eli Drinkowitz in Missouri, they were playing to win the game, and they won the game. So, that was a very another example, maybe even a microcosm of how this season has went. Things you were always able to count on Dan Mullen to bring to the table, a certain aggressiveness, a certain approach to the game. Didn't get that from Florida this year. So it's more than wins and losses of why Dan Mullen is no longer the coach of Florida. And kind of we can talk recruiting. That's the biggest issue. We can talk loyalty to staff. But the things you were always able to count on for Dan Mullen, even those fell apart this year.
And Dave, when from what I'm seeing online, I mean, obviously he made a huge impression on the players that he coached, from former players to current players. They're just very, very complimentary of him. Obviously, he took this situation with class. But just like I know, I mean, 2 New Year's Six bowls is very, very impressive. But it's been downhill, kind of starting last year with the LSU game. It kind of was able to get out of his own way. How much was this had to do with not just 2021, but kind of what got started at the end of 2020?
Yeah, but I think as far as on the field results, that's where it started. This wasn't just a 2021 look here. It goes back to that LSU game last year and losing that game a week before you play Alabama. And you go to Alabama. Look, you probably don't beat Alabama last year anyway, but you would have loved to give yourself a shot. And you kind of just that LSU game, an inexplicable loss there at home in the Swamp, heading into a chance for a college football playoff spot. And it really starts there. And then the explanation of the bowl game last year versus Oklahoma, players sitting out and not really taking it all that serious, and that's the feeling you got from that game last year. And then once you threw it all out there on the field again versus Alabama, it looks like that was the best part they could offer. That was they all they had in the tank versus that Alabama game. And then the season fell apart after that. But Ben, ultimately, man, it always goes back to me when Dan Mullen was hired. I agreed with the hire. He was the top pick. I thought he should have been the hire coming after Jim McElwain to dig Florida out of that offensive hole. but I still always had the question, could he recruit at a consistent enough level along with Kirby Smart, along with Nick Saban, to not just be a flash in the pan once every few years, to compete, to be in Atlanta on a consistent basis. It's going to be hard to do, no matter who the head coach is. But you want to go into that game in Jacksonville with a chance. You didn't get that chance this year. The season was pretty much already over with. It was the projection. It was what the direction of the program looked like. And with recruiting ever since Dan Mullen took over, not being able to take advantage of FSU and Miami being down, and then this being his worst class paired with a really bad season, I just don't know if there was a lot of hope in the direction of this program with the way the recruiting was trending for this Gator program.
David Waters, Gators Breakdown, joining us here on 3 and Out. And David, I think Dan Mullen was elected not to coach this week. What do you expect out of a Florida program finishing the season? Obviously, a win gets them bowl eligible, but now Dan Mullen is gone. You've lost your defensive coordinator. What kind of the season has not been what you thought it was going to be? What kind of effort do you expect this week? It's a rivalry game, but again, under the circumstances, what do you expect this weekend from Florida?
Yeah, whether Dan Mullen's going to be head coach or not, just Florida team's been struggling, and FSU's been improving. But you do have to go out there effort-wise, and it is a rivalry game. You go play for yourself. You go play for the seniors. That it is their last game to go out there as your teammate, or themselves, their last game they're going to play. And try, and if there's, I don't want to necessarily say respect for the staff, but if you want to go out there and just play your best for your last game with this staff as well. A lot of these guys were recruited by their staff, and you won last hurrah with their staff. So that's how you have to approach it. And Ben knows how it is. Ron Zook and getting carried off the field there in Tallahassee, his swan song game. Well, it won't be Dan Mullen as head coach, but still a lot of those staff members you'd like to send out in the right way, being a player out there. But also, I go back to Dan Mullen not necessarily being able to take advantage of Florida State being down and Miami being down. You beat those teams head to head. This is also really kind of you could look at it as a future game. I mean, Florida State's recruiting pretty well right now. If they can sit there and say on the trail, hey, we beat Miami this year, we beat Florida this year, it could set up a kind of maybe a spark in their recruiting to take over for Mike Norvell for a little while. So I think you're playing for that a little bit as well, as trying to stall some of the momentum that FSU might have on the trail. You can go out there and maybe stall it just a bit by going out there and getting the win with a lame duck staff.
David, everybody's reading the rumors online. Could it be Lane Kiffin? Could it be Billy Napier? What about Bob Stoops? In your mind, who are the legitimate candidates to be the next head football coach of the Florida Gators?
Legitimate, the hot name right now is Billy Napier. Maybe even some contacts already happened, and maybe that's why a move was made away from Dan Mullen before the FSU game, going out there and going ahead and getting into those sweepstakes. We don't know how far LSU might be in that conversation with Napier as well, as they're right down the road in Baton Rouge. So I think you look at it that way. But he seems to be the hot name out there. Look, I think there's even within like 5 minutes of me coming on this call with you guys, I think somebody's even tracked the flight from Gainesville to Lafayette, Louisiana. So that's where we're at right now. With that one. So, of course, you mentioned Lane Kiffin, and I'm not sure the Florida administration would go Lane Kiffin. I think he'd be a phenomenal hire for Florida with his offensive acumen there. I would love to know what the administration thinks of Lane Kiffin before they go that route. And you mentioned Bob Stoops. Could Florida get him out of retirement? And all the connections of being Steve Spurrier's defensive coordinator, of course, leading Oklahoma to great things, and then going to retiring. Can you get him out of retirement there? Or maybe even a Luke Fickell. Could you pull him from the Midwest, his background in Ohio? Could you get him from Cincinnati? Could he follow maybe a similar track like Urban Meyer did from Utah to go to Florida? He's got connections to Urban Meyer. Would he talk to Urban Meyer about the expectations and what can you expect as a head coach at the University of Florida? Those are probably I think the four names maybe being thrown around the most out there.
I mean, Dave, right, wrong, indifferent, fair or unfair, Scott Strickland, he's got to go out there and get his guy. I understand that we never know who that get. We always judge what he did after the guy he hires goes out there and do it. But how much pressure is on Scott Strickland not only go out there and get the guy, but get the guy that's going to not just make Florida relevant again, but competing at a high level not having to worry about, I don't know, being bowl eligible year in and year out.
Yeah, Ben, I mean, like I said, you got to nail the recruiting side of it. So I think a recruiting acumen would be a big part of the hire. What is the history of recruiting for that head coach? But also, Ben, a culture fit. Florida's a high-pressure job. The fan base is not easy. I don't think they're over-demanding. I don't think the expectations are any different than any other big program out there. Florida just hasn't been consistent as a Georgia lately or an Alabama lately. You hear what you hear about Florida fans. You hear a lot about Texas fans as well. So there's a consistent program like there at Oklahoma and Ohio State. If you inconsistency out there for those fan bases too, I think you're going to hear a lot of the same complaints you hear about a program like Florida. So I think it's the expectations of a big program, and can you get that right culture fit? It is a different culture here in Florida. There is a lot of pressure. Florida fans like to win. They like to win big. There's a little bit of arrogance about it. So can you get a head coach that likes to take that and go along with it? And then I think when things start to tailspin, work your way out of it and not have a type of year like Dan Mullen's had this year. Not saying you can't have bad years or something, but you got to find a way to prevent it and find a way to stop the momentum and go back the other way. You can't have these big down years where you're fighting for bowl eligibility at the end of the season.
David Waters, Gators Breakdown, our guest here on 3 and Out. David, appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
And thank you, guys.
And again, Dan Mullen out there at the University of Florida, and the coaching search begins. We'll get to some of that and more as we go throughout the show. This is 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Hit us up on Twitter at Pigskin Radio. Good to have you back here on this Monday. Kevin, BJ, and Ben will get to take three right around the corner. Brooks Austin, Dogs Daily on SI will join us. Dogs and Bama officially now going to play in the SEC championship game. We'll talk to him about that as well as getting ready for Georgia Tech this weekend. We did have the RSM Classic there on St. Simon's Island this weekend along the coast. Taylor Gooch wins it at 22 under. Some of the local guys who call that area home. Zach Johnson, -8. Matt Kuchar, -7. Jonathan Bird also at -7. Brian Harmon, -2. And Davis Love finished the tournament at +1. So a little quick recap there of the RSM and Taylor Gooch winning the RSM Classic.
Yeah, congratulations. You talk about 20 under. You know, he got off to a great start. You go back to Thursday and Friday and put yourself in a position, and then you maintain it through the weekend. You get your championship, and I believe the first on tour for him. So congratulations. And also cool to see some low scores from some of the local guys. I know maybe not right quite there at the end, but Zach Johnson, I mean, 9 under, 8, 9 under. I mean, that's getting it done. But congratulations. And I think you start talking about 20, 21, 22 under. That is absolutely getting it done.
Oh, yeah. That's way out there in the stratosphere as he was this week. We'll get to take three coming up next hour. Also more on Rivalry Week, more on Dan Mullen. How's that change things? You now have Florida, LSU, Southern Cal, all searching for coaches. How many rock star coaches are there out there to fill all of these gigs? You also, by the way, have Washington and Washington State in the Pac-12, and you could have a couple of more before this season is over. Virginia Tech. So you have a lot of
TCU.
You have a lot of P5 jobs that are open. How are you going to fill all these things? We'll look at that and more. It is 3 and Out all across the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Hit us up on Twitter at Pigskin Radio, streaming live, ESPNCoastal.com. You can also catch us online on our Facebook page, Twitter, and our YouTube channel at ESPN Coastal. They're on YouTube. We're coming back hour 2 next. We take 3 here on 3 and Out. Good to have you back here. Hour 2. Kevin, BJ, and Ben. We'll hear from Brooks Austin, Dogs Daily on SI. Coming up this hour, we'll talk some Georgia football with him as the Dogs now officially locked in with Alabama in the SEC championship game as they get ready for rivalry weekend coming up this Saturday there in Atlanta. We'll also look at the rivalry games, what makes a good rivalry game, which ones are our favorites here as we go into the post-Turkey Day. Thanksgiving's for being thankful, and then Friday, Saturday, it's all for not liking the other people on the other side when it comes to college football there at the end of the day. So we'll get to that coming up in just a little bit. But first, well, let's take 3 here on 3 and Out. All right, fellas, take 1. How soon will Dan Mullen be a candidate for another coaching job? And could he be on the sidelines with a new team as early as 2022?
I mean, he's got an incredible resume, and with so many job openings. I mean, even the openings we already know about. Like if you're TCU, do you call Dan Mullen and say, "Hey, had Mississippi State #1 in the country not that long ago. You had Florida in the SEC championship game last year within 1 score of Alabama." I think the resume is very impressive, and I think the opportunities will be there. And we were talking about this in the show meeting, Ben. I mean, could he be a head coach right away? Could he be a coordinator right away? I mean, potentially. I think there are going to be opportunities. It wouldn't stun me if maybe he does the TV thing where you take a year off, you do some television, you get away from it for a little bit, and then you come back in 2022 or 2023 and you're a viable candidate. But wouldn't stun me if he gets hired this upcoming cycle. And the reason is because of the domino effect, right? Like even if you say, okay, Dan Mullen's probably not a candidate at SC or LSU or anything like that. I mean, if Billy Napier goes to Florida and you're Louisiana, are you looking around going, wow, I mean, could I get a guy who was at Mississippi, at Florida, right there in the region? So I think the opportunities will be there. And the more I think about it, I think he'll probably be a head coach in 2022.
Yeah, I think it's already started. I mean, you don't lose the momentum and resume that a guy like Dan Mullen has. I mean Kevin and BJ. I mean, like I said in the opening segment, Dan Mullen is coach #7 since 2000. So it's not a matter of if, but when. I mean, Florida, the longest tenured coach that Florida's had that I can remember is Steve Spurrier. Since then, I mean, you get 4, maybe 5 years, and it's time to move on. So I do think, Kevin, when you think about a guy like Dan Mullen, I mean, he's still a big-time name. And you always got to think, when Florida got Dan Mullen, that was another school that had him on their radar. But he said, by him saying yes to Florida, that means he said no to other teams. You don't lose that. So look, right now, I mean, maybe we could call it the head coach transfer portal. I mean, somebody is saying, I want this dude. But the thing about it is if I'm at Louisiana Beach and I'm saying I ain't counting his money, but I'm like, well, we know he's getting $6 million in 60 days, and he's gonna get $1 million. We can't afford that type of coach anyway. And I would say this about Florida. That much pressure. I don't know if Dan Mullen wants to step into another pressure cooker like he just stepped out of, but I do think it's already started. Somebody is on the phone right now trying to bring Dan Mullen in, because if you say the new head coach of whatever team who is also the former head coach, Ron Zook left Florida and went to Illinois. Now, he didn't last, but you was at Florida, so that's got to mean something. I don't know if there's a better or bigger resume builder than that, so Dan Mullen is already being recruited.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I think it would be interesting about Dan Mullen, and there are certain guys that find themselves in this position. Okay, as Ben said, he's getting $30 million in the next 30 days from Florida, or $6 million, in the next 30 days. So he's got $6 million coming in. He's going to get paid $1 million a year for the next 6 years from Florida. Does somebody want him as a head coach? Yes. Given what happened at Florida, would Dan Mullen take a highly paid coordinator gig and basically have all the fun of designing and calling plays and none of the pressure of recruiting and worrying about what the locker room culture looks like in the locker room? I'm here to score points. That's what I'm doing. The end. And oh, by the way, Florida's still paying me $6 million, and all I need to do is worry about the offense at School X. I think that could be an interesting possibility for Dan Mullen in there as well, where you're well taken care of financially from the University of Florida. Do you go to a low-stress, relatively speaking, coordinator position? And if you want to get back into head coaching, you may not have to stay at School X, but maybe a year, and somebody will still be ringing that phone wanting you to be the head coach. That's just a hypothesis. I know, BJ, you said the TV route maybe, but I don't know. Some guys just like football. I think Dan Mullen's a guy that likes football. And maybe if it's not in the head coaching role, he can say, hey, I'll be out of the spotlight and just call offense and go with it. Moving along, take two. Who should be the Heisman favorite? Ohio State's C.J. Stroud or Alabama's Bryce Young?
And both had historic performances on Saturday. I think Stroud was 32 of 35 for like 425 with 6 touchdowns, I believe, all in the first half, which is a video game. And then Bryce Young was, I think, 33 of 40 for 559 and 6 touchdowns. Those guys are separating themselves, and it's been incredible watching them. I do think it's close. I think it's very close. But as I wrote on Southern Pigskin, I think it's Bryce Young right now. And if you look at the stats, they're incredibly comparable. But if you look at Stroud and Young right now, Bryce Young has 38 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. C.J. Stroud has 36 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. Bryce Young is at 71.7% completions. C.J. Stroud is at 71.1% completion. So they're right there. Stroud's at 10 yards per attempt. Young's at 9.8. C.J. Stroud's passer rating is 186.7. Bryce Young's is 186.2. So statistically, they're right there. I think what Young did on Saturday was maybe a little more impressive if you view those as kind of the springboard games. And I know you may be thinking, well, Ohio State put up, 49 or something in the first half against Michigan State? And I'm not taking anything away from that. I absolutely understand and agree with that. But if you're splitting hairs and comparing the two performances, Michigan State is last in the nation in pass defense, not 127th, not 128th. They are last, and they are last by a wide margin. You're talking about a historically bad pass defense for Michigan State, whereas Arkansas entered the weekend with a top 3 pass defense in the SEC. So if you view the two games from Saturday as kind of the signature games for Young and Stroud, Stroud had a great game, but did it against the worst pass defense in the country. Bryce Young did it against a pretty good group, and the numbers are pretty comparable. I think Christian said to me earlier, hey, it'll probably be decided on championship weekend. I think that's a good bet. But for right now, I would say Bryce Young.
Bryce Young is balling right now. He's trying to do something that, of everything that Alabama has done, the one thing they've never done, they've never had a Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback, which to me is crazy. But BJ, you're speaking from a reality and stat standpoint. I'm speaking from a perception standpoint. If you go to Saturday, all you saw was C.J. Stroud. Look at what he's doing in the first half. 32 or 35, 400, 32 yards and 6 touchdowns. I think he did that in the first half. And once again, biggest brand in college football, Alabama. One of the most recognizable brands. Oh my God, Ohio State. And BJ, you know just like I know. It's those moments, right? It's the fact that we'll look past what Bryce Young did because of what the game was, and we'll look at what C.J. Stroud did because it was a 9-1 Michigan State. So he'll look at the team more than the pass defense. So I would go C.J. Stroud, big time player at a big time university against a big time team in Michigan State who was coming in with one loss. Both teams coming in with one loss. So for me, I would go with C.J. Stroud right now, just slightly ahead, but ahead.
I feel like Bryce Young is the leader right now going into the final week of the regular season, and then we'll see what happens. Obviously, you've got the Iron Bowl, Michigan and Ohio State, 2 teams that are going to be, I think, potentially top 4, top 5 in the college football playoff poll when it comes out tomorrow. That's going to be a huge game. I think if C.J. Stroud goes off in that game, that might kick him ahead of Bryce Young. But it has been a weird year for Heisman Trophy in that nobody's really just jumped off the page and ran away with it. When it's all said and done. All right, take 3. Who is the current NFL MVP favorite in your estimation?
I think it's a running back. I think it's Jonathan Taylor for the Indianapolis Colts. And not only are the stats there, but Kevin, to go back to what we were talking about with the baseball MVP arguments, I think most valuable player really applies here when you look at Taylor's production and what he's done over the last month. Okay, right now, Jonathan Taylor leads the NFL with 1,122 rushing yards. He's a couple hundred yards in front of the runner-up. So he leads the NFL in rushing yards by a wide margin. Also leads the NFL with 13 rushing touchdowns. In addition to that, He is on pace for about 600 receiving yards, which is a good year for a wide receiver, has 332 receiving yards right now on 32 receptions, is averaging 6 yards per rush, 10 yards per catch. And beyond that, I think this is the important point. The Colts have won 3 games in a row, and the Colts have won 5 of 6 overall. And it's been Taylor who's been making the plays week after week. I mean, I think the Colts have a good roster. I don't think anybody would confuse them with, New England or Baltimore or, some of the more talented rosters in the league. And I think Taylor has elevated the status quo of that group. So for me, I know running backs get overlooked sometimes in the league. I think it's Jonathan Taylor.
Oh man, when I'm trying to think about who I want to put for my MVP right now, a lot of names. BJ, I like Jonathan Taylor. I like Patrick Mahomes, but I'm gonna give you a name, Kevin and BJ, that we sleeping on. I'm gonna go with Mr. Justin Herbert right now for them Chargers. You got to understand, this is a guy that is rookie year. I mean, over 4,000 yards. People thought that is he a 1 year wonder, or can he go out there and get it done? BJ, you talking about some stats? They are 6-4 right now, right behind those Kansas City Chiefs. This is what he did last night. He went 30 for 41, 382 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a pick. But BJ, this is what you like. He had 9 rushes yesterday for 90 yards. 9 for 9. Now, I am not confusing him with Lamar Jackson. His first name is Jesse. His last name is Herbert. But 9 for 90, that's better than any running back for the Tennessee Titans right now. And you know who the starting running back is for the Titans right now? Adrian Peterson. Adrian Peterson can give you 90 yards right now if everybody fell down every single play. And I love Adrian Peterson. But Justin Herbert, BJ, is doing it for an unlikely team like the Chargers. Let's face it. The Chargers in L.A. are like the Clippers in L.A. No one really cares, but you show up because ain't nothing else going on, currently. So give me Justin Herbert finding a way to get it done in year 2, and they're winning because of him, not in spite of him. Give me Mr. Justin Herbert.
That's good. I was going to say Matt Ryan's the MVP for continuing to walk out there behind the Falcons' offensive line every week. That's the real MVP. Who wants to take that beating?
It's Mama Ryan.
Yeah. Who wants to take that beating each and every week? That's take 3. We do it each every day. This time we'll come back. Still to come, we will chat with Brooks Austin in about 15 minutes. We're talking Georgia football with him. It is rivalry week. A lot of great ones out there each and every year here at the end of the season. We'll get to that next. It's 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. We'll get to Brooks Austin, Dogs Daily on SI coming up in just a little bit. As Georgia going to the SEC championship game, we knew that, but it was officially locked in over the weekend that Alabama will be joining them in Atlanta to play in that SEC championship game. So we'll get to Brooks. We'll talk about that coming up in just a little bit. It's also rivalry weekend, BJ and Ben, which means we all come together on Thursday. We have our turkey, our dressing, our sweet potatoes, pumpkin pie, etc. And then Friday and Saturday, get out of my face. It's time to get after it in rivalry weekend and some great games, obviously, at the end of the year.
All right, do you have your list? Ben, do you have your list? We had to make, top 5 regular season rivalry week rivalry games, because you have like Georgia, Florida, and you have Army, Navy next week, and you have some rivalries throughout the year. But last week of November rivalries, right?
That's correct. That was the parameters, unless you're changing them, much like you did earlier and name that team. We will stick with the last.
Yeah. I say Washington State.
Yeah, the last week, the last week in November rivalries. Yes, that's what we're basing it on. Go ahead.
All right, I'll give you my top 5, and for you, only for you, I'm going 5-1. I will go 5-1 with this list. Number 5 for me, the Bayou Classic, an HBCU showcase. You think about Grambling and Southern, great history, great tradition. I think it's a series that dates back to 1932. They're in the state of Louisiana, and great football, the bands, obviously. So the Bayou Classic for me, an HBCU showcase between Grambling and Southern at number 5. Number 4, they call it, Ben, the Sunshine Showdown. I don't know if that's a new name or if that, but we know it is Florida State, okay? Florida State, Florida. I don't know that we'll ever see necessarily a return to the consistent kind of national implications you have with Steve Spurrier and Bobby Bowden, but still programs right down I-10 from each other. Ben, you've played it, you've lived it, but players that know each other. And I think we'll have a lot on the line again soon. And I'm not talking about bowl eligibility this weekend, but because of that, had to throw that in there. But I'll go Florida State, Florida at 4. Number 3, and I wanted to put this higher. I wanted to put it higher because I love this game, the Egg Bowl. And Ole Miss and Mississippi State, you don't have pro football there. You're not always competing for national championships, but that is what each team is focused. If you're Ole Miss, nothing else matters but beating Mississippi State. If you're Mississippi State, nope, you got to beat Ole Miss. And has a crazy history when you think about the game. I think the reason I believe they came up with the Golden Egg Trophy is because when one of the teams won way back in the day, they rushed the field and said, we're taking the goalpost. Like, we're taking it back. We're taking it all the way back. So the Egg Bowl right there at number 3. Number 2 for me, the game. And I know some people may say, oh, come on, it's Michigan, Ohio State. And it has not been a close rivalry as of late. Ohio State has dominated. Ohio State has won by multiple scores more often than not. But I still think the history, the legacy, the programs, you have to go with the game, Michigan, Ohio State. And number 1 for me is the Iron Bowl. And maybe that's a boring pick, but Alabama and Auburn, everything shuts down. Not only in Alabama, but in the South. I know Auburn's been down a little bit, but for a while, not just recently, but throughout the decades, you've had national title implications, SEC title implications. You think about the kick 6. I mean, so many great moments. So I'll go number 5, Grambling Southern. Number 4, Florida State. Number 3, Mississippi State, Ole Miss. Number 2, Michigan, Ohio State. Number 1, Alabama, Auburn.
And listen, and because BJ, you started off the right way, I'm gonna go 5-1. But I mean, for me though, I mean, I got 6. You know, I got 5A and 5B. I know we changed the rules. We started early in the day, so my number 5 is the Bayou Classic. I mean, listen, Southern, talking about Grambling, you're talking about Battle of the Band, you're talking about some of the best food and atmosphere and culture. You're gonna get all wrapped up in one. You know, I mean, you know, it's one of those things the way, you know, you had to have been there. I mean, I've seen a hope. I'm gonna have to get down there, you know, one of these days, man, just so I can, you know, embody some of that culture and that love. And Kevin, I'm not even gonna say, no, I am gonna do it because I did say I had to. My 5B, Palmetto Bowl. I'm sorry, Clemson and South Carolina. I got a chance to go to it. BJ, good old Keith Adams. I think Keith Adams had 30 tackles for Clemson, by the way. And listen, he knocked somebody out on the kickoff team. He's run out and knocked the blocker out and looked to the crowd because it was at. You know, it was at South Carolina, and people were booing. I was like, yeah, you better hope you don't come up in these stands. My number 4, the Sunshine Showdown. I wish we're gonna have to veto that freaking name. Kevin and BJ try to get something different. Played in it, didn't really understand it. until I played in the BJ. You talking about people throwing stuff. My freshman year, when Florida State went to the Orange Bowl National Championship, I mean, I'm just saying, I mean, I got belted in the face with oranges that felt like grapefruits. I got belted in the face by Chris Winky, those guys, Snoop and those guys. Number 3, fashion hate. I'm sorry, people. I'm sorry. People think, oh, well, Georgia right now, they the number 1 team. Let me tell y'all something. Georgia Tech cannot stand Georgia. I've been to a Georgia Tech basketball game. They weren't even playing Georgia, and they was talking trash about the Georgia Bulldogs. They don't like nothing about them. When they say welcome to Atlanta and Georgia Tech, that's actually in Atlanta. When they say welcome to Atlanta and Athens, well, that's a recruiting tactic that obviously worked for JT Daniels because, well, he's never went, anywhere past, I guess Denver at this point. My number 2, the Iron Bowl, BJ. Look, Auburn, Alabama, listen, throw away everything. I played with guys that went to Alabama and Auburn when I was with the Titans, and they have a genuine dislike for each other, and, I mean, you can appreciate it. And, BJ, it has been competitive. It has been competitive back and forth, but it can be one-sided. It has nothing to do with which team is better, which team isn't. But my number 1, it is the Egg Bowl. Let me tell y'all something. When it comes to the state of Mississippi, ain't no in-between, ain't no fence straddling. You either with Oxford or Stark Vegas. You're going to pick a side. They're going to make you pick a side. I mean, I've heard, listen, when I was with the Oakland Raiders, man, I had 2 guys. One from Mississippi State, the other one for Ole Miss. They started making up stuff about each other while they're talking about GPAs. They started talking about upbringing. They started talking about, how they treated. I was like, wait a minute. People say, oh, what about Archie? What about Eli? Like, what about it? People, and BJ, this is before the days of Dak and all this other type of stuff. I mean, look, what you got AJ Brown, you got DK Metcalf, they look like action figures, at receiver. You talking about Dak Prescott and what he meant to Mississippi State. So for me, it is the Egg Bowl because when an entire state shuts down because it's all about this game, man, you gotta love it. So for me, give me the Egg Bowl 1, Iron Bowl 2, Clean No Fashion Hate 3, the Sunshine Showdown 4, the Bayou Classic / Palmetto Bowl, my 5A and 5B. Kevin, the floor is yours, sir. I think we know who your top 5 is going to be. I don't.
Do you know who my top 5 is going to be?
I was flowing. I just went.
and again, these are ones that I just look forward to. Just falling short. BJ said this before the show too. Just falling short. Apple Cup. Why? Because it's everything you think about when you think about the state of Washington. It's usually gray, it's rainy, it's cold, it looks gross outside, and they're playing football. I love it. Washington State and Washington didn't make the list, though. Number 5, Bedlam. I love it. It's called Bedlam. Like, just go nuts. It's Oklahoma State, which this year could be for a playoff spot for Oklahoma State. They are just 1 loss on the season. You beat Oklahoma, go to the Big 12 championship game. Who knows? Stranger things have happened there. And again, you got Mike Gundy on one side, really bringing a lot for Oklahoma State, helping them not be so Oklahoma dominated. But again, I just love the fact that it's called Bedlam. Number 4, I said Florida versus Florida State. I refuse to call it what Ben said it was. That's a stupid name. And it's just, I mean, come on. Come up with something better. And until then, we're just going to call it Florida v. Florida State. 2 teams that get after it. 2 teams that usually have a lot of NFL talent. They go after each other, and 2 teams that usually are good for a fake chest thumping at the midfield stripe before the game starts and go, you step back. No, hold me back. No, you hold me back. That kind of thing. So I like that. And then the top 3 are quite simple. All the parameters you said, in-state rivalry, no pro football, and usually good for at least a fight or 2 every once in a while. Number 3, Palmetto Cup, Clemson, South Carolina, hate each other, good for a fight. I think one year, Lou Holtz, they were like, 0-10, and they're out there throwing fists at Clemson. I mean,
you got to win something. We're going to win something.
Yeah, we didn't win the game. We won the brawl. That's all that matters. We got winner certificates for that. There at the end.
I was at that banquet. Awful.
Ben might have gotten a winner certificate for that. Also, number 2, Egg Bowl. Again, it's the biggest thing in the state of Mississippi, and you had a player pretend to be a dog on a walk in the end zone. That's all I'm going to say.
Walked himself.
Yeah, walked himself right into the end zone, and that started outrage. And then number 1, of course, it's the Iron Bowl. Usually has a lot of implications, and BJ might be one of the few rivalry games in which the following article was written. Man says he stabbed his relative because he, quote, was not upset enough about losing to Auburn. That was a real story. Someone stabbed their own relative because they weren't taking the loss hard
somebody
enough.
else poisoned the trees at Auburn and called into the station.
Yes.
I think it was Paul Firebaum show to let them know, well, I just poisoned the trees. And all the toilet paper you ever seen will be used and thrown by the Auburn fans.
Yes.
A lot of crazy.
So that there's no question that one is number one. When another fan drives 100+ miles to go poison trees that aren't in the stadium, they're up the street and say, "You think I care?" That is a rivalry game.
Put that
my
Scam
friends.
Newton jersey.
Yeah, when they put that Scam Newton jersey.
I mean, and that same guy said, quote, he wanted to name his daughter Alabama. If you don't get, he did. It's some crazy nonsense, man. It's some craziness. His wife said, no.
Love the Iron Bowl and everything it encompasses. We'll come back. We'll chat with Brooks Austin, Dogs Daily on SI.com. Georgia, we knew was going to the SEC championship game. They now know for sure they will be playing Alabama. He'll join us next here on 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Welcome back. It's 3 and Out on this Monday. Good to have you with us here on the show. And joining us here from Dogs Daily on SI, good friend of the show, Brooks Austin, joining us here. Brooks, welcome. How are you?
Doing well, gentlemen. How are y'all today?
Doing fantastic. Obviously, we knew the way it was going to go on Saturday, but Georgia finds out officially it's Alabama in the SEC championship game. And just talk about, now that you know, you have obviously several weeks, couple weeks at least, to prepare mentally for that challenge. And does you finish up obviously with a rivalry game against a team that's quite frankly not very good?
Yeah, I was waiting on Kirby Smart to be asked the question about playing Alabama, just to hear him say, "Oh, we're focused on beating Georgia Tech this week. They're a really good football team. We respect what Jeff Collins and his staff are doing over there. Those guys are doing a great job." So, no, I mean, you got some time to think about Alabama, right? You got time to look ahead forward towards them, maybe even sneakily practice some schemes that they run. I know Kirby's, alleviated to doing that in prior weeks. Prior matchups, against teams that they knew they would handle mightily, like they will Georgia Tech on Saturday, I would imagine. But I've said all along since about week 6, if you're going to get Alabama and you're going to get over the Bama hurdle, this is the year to try to do it. I wouldn't want anybody else, if I were a Georgia fan right now, than Alabama in the SEC championship game to get that monster over with, to slay that dragon and be done with it. Because I think this is the year that they are most vulnerable for sure.
Going back to Saturday, Brooks, how cool was it to see Jordan Davis get a rushing touchdown?
Yeah, you knew something like that was going to happen. I think it was funny after the game. Kirby actually, I think he gave it away. He said Jalen Carter had been actually asking to catch a pass, and they might sneak him out later in the season to get him a little receiving touchdown potentially like they did last year. It was fun. It's always fun to see a big guy score, right? A thick 6, as Chris Long and some of those guys would say on social media. But I always love watching a big guy score. I think it was even funnier to watch him lead the band. Kirby said something about it today. Actually Saturday afternoon, he said that, Jordan's a worldly guy. He's made friends on that campus way beyond football, including the band. So a great send-off to an even better career so far for Jordan Davis. And he's got about 4 games left to go out there and really put a nail in a historic career for a defensive tackle at Georgia.
And Brooke, I mean, even sticking with that, you talk about a guy like Jordan Davis, his influence on a guy like Kirby Smart. Kirby's gonna give you the poker face. Obviously, Kirby is all about football, but Kirby is doing things this year we never saw him. He would never have done this in the past. Not saying he didn't want to, but he had to earn his stripes. So we just talk about how even a guy like Jordan Davis is helping a guy like Kirby Smart. Not saying he doesn't, but enjoy this ride while you on this ride.
I think the most important way that Jordan Davis helps Kirby Smart is be the best nose tackle that college football has seen in the last couple of years, in an odd front defense that plays a lot of true zero. Like, he's over the center a lot, two gapping, taking care of both A gaps between the guards, and that frees up linebackers. Look, the linebacker play for Georgia this year has been great. Don't get me wrong. Nakobe Dean is a bona fide Butkus Award candidate and probably will win the award. Clay Walker's been playing great. Channing Tindall's been playing great. But turn on the film. Turn on the film of Georgia's defense and watch what 99 does. There are 3 people that are touching him at all times, which lets your middle linebackers just run free. They get to do things that other linebackers never get to do. They get to do things schematically that other defenses never get to do, because their interior defensive line is so daggum good that they know that offensive line of the opposition is never going to get to the second level.
Brooks Austin, Dogs Daily and SI, joining us here on 3 and Out. And Brooks, obviously, Georgia Tech this weekend, who's obviously having a pretty bad season under Jeff Collins. What's kind of the goal there? I think they could pick the score, but what's kind of the goal getting ready for the SEC championship game?
Man, I'll just talk about Georgia Tech for a minute. Look, I've been betting Georgia Tech for a lot this season because I think that team fights for Jeff Collins, or at least they had until last week. So seeing a 55, goose egg against Notre Dame was utterly shocking to me. Now, I know they'll be at home this week, but again, I think that football team's played hard for him apart from last week. They laid an absolute egg up there in Notre Dame. So, but in terms of Georgia, it's a lot like you tried to do last week, right? Get the game controlled, get the game settled and decided early on, get that first unit out of the lineup. But they're not. Luckily it's an out of conference game, So they'll be able to travel a bunch of those backups. If this were an in-conference game and you were favored by 35 points, you'd probably see what happened against Tennessee, or Devontae Wyatt's playing midway through the fourth quarter, because you ain't got no other bodies out there, because you can only travel so many on an interconference game. Luckily, this one is out of conference, so I'm sure they'll travel a full 85, 90 guys.
Saw 4 quarterbacks last week. What did you make of those guys' performances, and do you think we'll see multiple quarterbacks this weekend?
It's really hard to tell in terms of what they're doing, at the quarterback position after the game's controlled. Brock Vandagriff, I don't think attempted a pass at all in the football game. Carson Beck barely got to run the offense. They're basically only throwing on 3rd and long at that situation. So I like to reserve comment for anything like that until I get a larger sample size. I think JT Daniels has played relatively well. It's clear that, his mental capacity is still there. He's still really sharp, still getting all the reads and keys correct at the right time. And it seems like he's picking up the speed of the game pretty well as well after not having played in a while. But again, it's Charleston Southern, and you're up 40 points when you get into the football game. So it's really, really hard to evaluate. But yeah, I would imagine you see a couple of them this week again, assuming again that the game is handled early on in the football game.
Brooks, the one thing I noticed about when I'm watching Georgia play, they think that everybody on the field is a 5-star. They think everybody on there, from the kickers, punters, long snappers, but that's not the case. People talk about development at other schools. Brock Bowers, look at how well of a player he is as a true freshman, not having, Pickens and Burton, those guys all year long. Just talk about the development that you see at Georgia, because we see the recruiting rankings and we think, oh man, they got 25 5-stars. No. But just talk about how they look like 5-stars, even though they might not have 5 stars attached to their name.
Yeah, Bowers was a top 100 player. I know he's an SI 99 player for us over at SI All-American. I don't know what he was on the landscape in terms of the composite, but to your point, AD Mitchell, not a highly recruited guy. Ladd McConkey, not a highly recruited guy. Jordan Davis. The list goes on. I mean, they have a really, really long list of football players. Chris Smith, not one of these 5-star top 100 type football players. This is a very important football player for this team. Dan Jackson, former walk-on. Stetson Bennett, former walk-on. So, they're doing things in terms of the development of the football team that stand out. But I think when I look at things like this, in modern football, modern college football, in order to develop guys, you got to get them and convince them to stick around your program. That's not really something that's a given nowadays in college football with the college transfer portal. So I think we can talk a lot about development, but we also have to talk a little bit about culture when we talk about these guys sticking around for 4, sometimes 5 years to develop into the ultimate player that they end up becoming. So I think, it says a lot about development. They're picking the right guys also. AD Mitchell didn't have much development, guys. He's been on campus for 8 months, and he's one of your best receivers. That's a great job scouting and evaluating. That's nothing to do with development. Same thing for Ladd McConkey. You could say the same thing about Brock Bowers. So it's a great job of identifying talent, but also a great job of keeping them around and developing them.
Brooks Austin, Dogs Daily on SI, joining us here on 3 and Out. Brooks, kind of talk about just the craziness of this college football season and what potentially lies ahead for Georgia, because you're talking about Alabama, the SEC championship game, a chance for Georgia with a win to kick Alabama out of the playoff. We saw Oregon's going to fall out. You got the game this weekend. If Michigan wins, Ohio State with 2 losses likely could be out of that situation. Oklahoma State surprisingly starting to sneak up in there if they can win Bedlam this week. I mean, talk about how this thing could get shaped over the next 2 weeks. Notre Dame in that playoff picture.
Notre Dame's still hanging around. Yeah. Wisconsin, by the way, only has 1 loss and is going to win the Big Ten West and have a Big Ten championship game against whoever comes out of the East. So, there's still a lot to be decided. This college football season, everyone's been wanting parity, right? It's the whole reason everyone begged for 12-team playoff. We need more parity. I'm sick and tired of the same 5 teams. Well, guess what, guys? You got all the parity you can ask for this football season. We don't know who in the hell is good outside of Georgia. That's it. Everyone else has flaws. You can poke holes in everyone else's resume except for Georgia. And, oh, by the way, it's November 22nd, and we don't have an idea of who's going to win the Heisman Trophy. We don't have a clue. No clue. Georgia has – I don't even think Georgia's the best team in college football by a wide margin. They're not even going to have anybody represented in New York, I don't believe. So, college football parity's here, but it also means we got no answers. We have very few answers when it comes to college football right now. And we are 11 weeks in. So, 12 weeks in at this point. Yeah. So, it's a wild year, that's for sure.
Is there a potential matchup, a team that you think would give Georgia the most problems?
Ohio State. My God, Ohio State scares the ever-loving piss out of me as a defensive coordinator. Offensively, they're so good. So good. They have the best. I mean, we could talk about Alabama. We can compare it to Ohio State's wide receivers core in terms of Ruggs, Judy, and Devontae Smith. This trilogy up there at Ohio State, it's going to be up there, guys. I mean, Olave is going to be a first-round draft pick. Garrett Wilson is going to be a first-round draft pick. And the young kid, the Jackson, whatever. I forget his name. He's really good, number 11. He's like great, okay? So they're going to have 3 first-round draft picks, a wide receiver eventually when it all shakes out. And C.J. Stroud is lighting it up right now. So that offense, they can score, okay? So if they can hold Georgia to a 35-point game, that might get interesting.
And Brooks, finally, man, when you think about this Georgia team as a whole, I mean, I'm not looking towards the end. I mean, because if they do win that national championship, I'm gonna have to deal with everybody that I've ever talked trash to when it comes to them Georgia fans, and rightfully so. But we talk about a team. Is there any more unlikely team than this Georgia team this year? A guy named Stetson, who wasn't on campus, get a chance, right? Stetson, last time I checked, was a hat or a fragrance, not a football player. Jordan Davis, a guy who should be in the Heisman Trophy, a Heisman Trophy finalist. Their best receiver, George Pickens, probably won't even play this year. When we talk about teams and storylines, I know that 2019 LSU team was one. Where do you think this Georgia team will stack up if they can indeed finish the job?
You know, I feel like every year we talk about this being the best college football team ever. I mean, we talked about in 2019 with how great that, LSU team was. I mean, you could make the argument that Alabama's team last year to go undefeated in an all SEC schedule and then to score as many points as they did and win the way they did in the college football playoff. I feel like every year we talk about how dominant the winner is. That's what's great about college football, man. Like, you don't survive this. You don't make it through a college football season and become the national champion without being the best team in the sport. That's why it's perfect. It's awesome the way it is. You go to 12 teams, we might not get that. We might not. Fraudulent teams will make a 12-team playoff. Fraudulent teams don't win 14 playoffs. They don't. Look at the winners we've had since this thing has been invented. They have been undoubtedly and unquestionably the best team in college football that season. It's beautiful the way it is. I hope they keep it like this the more and more I watch it, because, again, we're not going to have any questions at the end of this. There's going to be one definite final champion, and it's the only sport that we watch that's like that.
Brooks Austin, Dogs Daily on SI, does a great job covering the Georgia Bulldogs. Our guest, Brooks, appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
No doubt, gentlemen. See y'all.
Brooks Austin joining us here on 3 and Out. We'll come back. We'll give away a copy of a short week for Thanksgiving. We figured to do it on a Monday. Give away a copy of Ben's book, Uncommon and Unfinished. We'll do that when we come back. It's 3 and Out here on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you back here, 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. A lot to get to coming up in the final hour of the program. We'll chat with Chris Gordon, Locked On SEC podcast. Also, Josh Pate will join us coming up in just a little bit. And we'll talk to both of them in the last hour of the program. And again, we've got a chance for you to win a copy of Ben's book, Uncommon and Unfinished, the Ben Troop story. Unlike Dan Mullen, his turn, he gets finished.
Hey, I'll
see. I have a new joke about finished every week.
Mullen and Miss Mullen a copy, but no, yes, Uncommon and Unfinished, the Ben Troop story with BJ Bennett. We are giving away a free copy right now. All you got to do is dial 912-342-7184. Once again, it's 912-342-7184 to get a free autographed copy of Uncommon Unfinished, the Ben Troop story with BJ Bennett. Listen. How did Kevin listen? My book is finished.
Your book is finished. It is not unfinished.
It is not unfinished. No,
you will receive a finished copy.
Yes,
of Uncommon.
You will receive a finished copy of Uncommon Unfinished, the Ben Troop story with BJ Bennett, just by dialing in at 912-342-7184. That's 912-342-7184 to get a free signed autographed copy of Uncommon Unfinished. The Ben Troop story with BJ Bennett.
We're going to give away one a week through the Super Bowl. So now's your chance to get one. Caller number 4 right now, 912-342-7184, 912-342-7184, and you can get a copy of Ben's book. And again, right here before Thanksgiving, nice little something to pick up, 912-342-7184. A lot to get to coming up in the final hour. Dan Mullen is out. Who's Florida going to get? I mean, it's a lot of marquee jobs open. And then the reports about, is Brian Harsin, who's from the Northwest, is he interested in Washington or Washington State gig? Might that be interesting? So we'll get to that coming up in the final hour of the program as well. But again, caller 4 right now, 912-342-7184. Get a copy of Ben's book, Uncommon and Unfinished, a Ben Troop story with BJ Bennett. So I know a lot of folks have been getting their copies and reading, and a lot of good positive reviews there on the book.
Really good, Kevin. Been really appreciative of everybody who's read the books. Make sure you keep buying them. Keep going. Putting your comments out there, man. It's been really fun for myself and BJ Bennett. Uncommon Unfinished.
Yep.
The Ben Troop story with BJ Bennett. 912-342-7184 for a free autograph signed copy, and you might just get a bonus of Kevin Thomas' greatest hits. But that's another show for another day.
That is not happening. No, but again, if you don't win a copy, go to bentroop84.com, bentroop84.com, and you can buy one right there as well. Makes a great Christmas gift.
Yes.
I'm just going to throw that out there. bentroop84.com. If you don't win a copy, buy a copy. Makes a great Christmas gift out there as well. We're coming back hour 3 next here on 3 and Out. Welcome back. Final hour here of 3 and Out. A lot to get to here on the show. Josh Pace, 247 Sports, will join us coming up in just a little bit. We'll talk some college football with him as we come down the stretch. But joining us here, host of the Locked On SEC podcast and Sports Talk 790 in Houston, Chris Gordy, joins us here on 3 and Out. Chris, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, what's going on, guys? Sad week. This is our last week of college football. Granted, we'll get the championship weekend, the bowl games, but man, we wait all damn year for this thing, and it just seems to fly right by.
Oh, it certainly does. And you wind up, like you said, going, it's Thanksgiving, and what in the world just happened to the college football season? It's also the time for firings, although that window seems to have been sped up here in 2021. But Dan Mullen out at Florida. You already have the LSU gig open. Some reports that maybe Brian Harsin is interested in some of the jobs back in the Northwest. I mean, what do you make of the openings that we do have? Obviously, we know about LSU, but Dan Mullen out, how attractive is that gig?
Yeah, I mean, it's very attractive. I mean, it's interesting kind of contrasting it to where we were last offseason where, you know, Vanderbilt opens up and South Carolina opens up and then old Auburn, you know, opens up in Tennessee. And those are two really good programs. But, man, Florida and LSU, I put a step above both those programs in Auburn and Tennessee. I think these are two premier jobs. I think they're both, you know, top 10 level jobs and, you know, should attract a lot of names. You know, I just find it interesting nowadays when we get into these coaching searches, so many people just want to shut things out. Oh, I'm not interested in that job. Why would I be interested in that job? And it's just so funny how everyone goes into denial mode where, you know, it used to be people would be like, oh yeah, that's a great job. Yeah, that's interesting. You know, it's like, it's just everybody's ready to shut down. And, you know, it's almost like, well, who do we have left if everybody's saying they don't want this job?
One coach that we've heard, at least rumored, who knows how real it is, but online with LSU and Florida, Lane Kiffin. Do you think there's a chance Lane Kiffin would leave Ole Miss for another job in the SEC?
I think Lane Kiffin is going to be in play no matter where he is, and that's what almost makes him scary. If you're a fan of if you're a fan of a school like Florida or LSU, it would be a great win to get a coach like Lane Kiffin. But it would be scary as hell every single year because his name would pop up for every other opening that pops up. I mean, he is a nomad. He is a guy who doesn't stay anywhere very long. I mean, even when he was at FAU, the rumors were always, you know, when is he going to jump? When is he going to make the jump to the next big thing? And now that he's at Ole Miss and he's done a heck of a job, if they win the Egg Bowl on Thanksgiving night, it's going to be a 10-win season. You know, he could certainly parlay that into a better program. I think what Lane has to ask himself personally is, can I win at a program like Ole Miss? Is there ever going to be a year where I can bust through, win the SEC West, win the SEC, and get to a playoff game? You know, if he honestly feels that way, then sure. But there's no doubt the advantages he would have at a Florida or at LSU. Better advantages recruiting, better advantages just overall a chance to actually compete for a title. Whereas I don't know if he's ever going to have that chance at Ole Miss.
What's going on right now with Florida, with LSU, and you're thinking to yourself, what type of coach are they hiring? You think about Coach O. I mean, he won the national championship. His teams might be better, than the previous two national championship teams. You know, and then you look at Florida and a guy like Dan Mullen who took Florida out the dark ages, got him back. You know, being talked about nationally. But you look at this season. So do they want coaches to get them back in the national conversation and win consistently, or is it about getting back to the national championships or bust?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Florida wants to compete for titles, but I think what you saw there was he did not embrace the recruiting like a lot of people thought he was going to. At Mississippi State, man, he peaked with the Dak Prescott year, and you know they were undefeated, you know, number one in the country. I mean, they were right up there. And when he got to Florida, he brought all that hype and familiarity, obviously having coached there before and all that. But he didn't bring the excitement of recruiting. It's not to say he recruited bad. I mean, he brought in some good classes, brought in some good recruits, but he just didn't recruit at that top 5, you know, level that a lot of people were hoping he was going to be able to do at Florida. And obviously his team suffered from that. And you know, he was missing talent in some positions where when you compared it to the LSUs and the Alabamas, and, you know, there were just teams that were better than them at times. So I think what Auburn or what Florida's looking for is, first and foremost, somebody who can recruit well, but two, somebody who's going to bring an exciting brand of football. And yeah, look, when you talk about, I was just looking at the numbers today. You're talking about these two programs, LSU and Florida, have won 5 of the last 18 national championships. And it's crazy to think that because it feels like Alabama has dominated, and they certainly have. They won almost the rest of them. But, these are two premier programs, and obviously Florida's, 2 titles were over a decade ago. But still, like in the last 20 years, these are 2 big-time jobs that are as relevant as it gets. So, yeah, I think Florida fans were just kind of starting to get fed up, and obviously what we saw this year, him standing by Todd Grantham, I thought that was going to be, one of his undoings, and it was. But man, I just didn't see him losing like he did and putting the final nail in his coffin.
We're talking with Chris Gordy, Locked On SEC podcast. And Chris, we look ahead to the SEC championship. We knew Georgia was going to be there. Now Alabama locks themselves in. What do you expect? I know a lot of people said before the season this might be the year to get Alabama if you're going to. And so far they've only lost once. They're still going to the SEC championship game. What do we expect 2 weeks out when Georgia and Alabama clash together there in Atlanta?
Yeah, it's no doubt Alabama's offense has really, has really been good this year. I think it's been almost a little bit underrated because I think so many people have talked about defense and how susceptible they've been. I mean, look, the crazy part was, to me, the storyline against Arkansas over the weekend was, my gosh, they let Arkansas hang around, and Arkansas with the fake punt scores a touchdown, and they're right there, and they lose by 7. But everybody's headlines after the game was, oh, look at Bryce Young, Heisman conversation, all this. I'm going, guys, we're not talking about the big problems with Alabama. And look what they did against LSU. LSU was right there with a chance to upset them. So this is not the dominant Alabama team that we've come to know them from in recent years. There's just, they have games where the offense hasn't been good. They've had a lot of games where the defense hasn't been good. They have not seen a defensive front like this Georgia defensive front yet this year. The offensive line has had time outside of Evan Neal. They've had times where they're not good with pass protection. Now Bryce Young has done a good job of delivering, accurate passes under pressure downfield. But can he do that consistently? And I just, when I saw last week, the early spread was Georgia -3. I'm going -3. Like, give me Georgia -10. I just feel like Georgia should win this thing going away, because the defense is so dominant. They're going to get after it up front. And then offensively, man, it's time to start giving Stetson Bennett his roses. Stop calling this guy a game manager. Stop calling him a guy who's just going to manage the game. No, this guy is a playmaker. He's shown it with his legs at times. He's shown it with his arms. He's one of the most accurate passers in college football. And let's be real, JT Daniels finally got healthy. And guess what? Stetson Bennett was better than JT Daniels. That's why Daniels isn't back starting. So I think Georgia's got the full package. It just starts to feel like they're a team of destiny. The only thing that can cost Georgia in this game is Kirby Smart making dumb decisions like we've seen him do in the past, make punts and things like that. If he defers to his great coaches, his assistant coaches, I think Georgia's going to have a good chance to win and win big over Alabama.
Chris, I did want to ask you this about the SEC championship game, though. Is around the country we've seen playoff contenders lose. Is there a chance if Alabama beats Auburn and maybe loses on a last-second field goal to Georgia, number 1 Georgia, in the SEC title game, given the perception around the program, given that they're number 2 right now, is there a chance Alabama could still sneak in as number 4?
There's absolutely a chance, but it's stupid. I mean, I call it, the playoff has become the Nick Saban Invitational. It's just, he gets an invite every year, even when his teams aren't great. And, my big thing, and I'm an SEC guy through and through, guys, but like at the end of the day, why are we playing the games? Resumes have to matter. And right now, particularly coming off this past weekend, Ohio State put up a dominant win at home over a really good Michigan State team, blew the doors off them. Alabama struggled and hung on to beat Auburn or Arkansas by 7. These are not equal wins. Like, if the playoff committee is true to themselves and reacting to what they see week to week, Ohio State should be the number 2 team this week. Alabama should drop down. They have not looked consistently like the second best team in the country week in and week out, and with their resume. Again, Alabama's always going to have the talent. Don't get me wrong. They're always going to be loaded with 5-star talent because Saban puts together number 1 recruiting classes every single year. But I just feel like this is a year that we have to look at it and say Alabama lost to Texas A&M. You have to be knocked for that. You can't just say, oh, well, you know, they lost on the last second field goal. No, it was a loss. And if they lose to Georgia, it's their second loss, and they have no business being in the playoff. Even if it's close, even if it's a last second field goal, Alabama should not be in. However, the playoff committee just has this Alabama bias. I don't know if Saban is their vacation with Saban in the summer home or whatever, but I think the committee is absolutely going to consider Alabama if that scenario happens.
And Chris, that being said, though, if Alabama does lose to a last-second field goal and they still find their way into the college football playoff, do you see it staying at 4, or do you see Alabama being the reason why this thing finally does, get expanded?
Well, here's the problem. If you keep Alabama at 4 and they get in, you're not going to want them with a rematch with Georgia again that quickly. So in that scenario, you'd either have to find a way to reason yourself to put Alabama up to 3, or you'd have to find a reason to let's say it's an ugly game. Let's say Georgia beats Alabama 16-13. Well, then I think there's argument there to knock Georgia down from 1 to 2, because you said, well, Georgia, you played a terrible, ugly game in your in your title game, whereas we expect maybe Ohio State playing in a Big Ten title game. Let's say they win 56-10. In that scenario, I would say Ohio State could jump them. So I think the committee's got to take all that into consideration, because if you're going to put Bama in, we can't get an Alabama-Georgia rematch again in the very first round. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I don't want to see something we just saw and saw how it goes. And Chris Gordy, Locked On SEC podcast, joining us here. And Chris, how do you look at the strength of the SEC here before we let you go? Obviously, you look at Georgia's dominating in the East. We've seen some great stories with South Carolina getting bowl eligible. I think everybody in the East, though, a lot of losses outside of Georgia. The West is still Alabama. Auburn has now got, 4 or 5 losses? How do you kind of look at the strength of the SEC right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's really strong. I mean, you got Kentucky with an opportunity to go beat Louisville this week and get the 9 wins. If they win their bowl game, they're double-digit victories this year. You got Tennessee, who everybody expected to be bad. They punched their ticket already to a bowl game. They're ahead of schedule. Mizzou, who looked like one of the worst teams in the conference 3 weeks ago, they punched their ticket to a bowl game with some big wins. Shane Beamer, I don't think anybody had getting the 6 wins this year. People thought, okay, it's going to be a nice year, maybe 5 wins. He'll eventually get this thing in recruiting. No, I mean, he's had some nice wins already in year 1 for Shane Beamer, so that's a great story. On the other side, obviously Lane Kiffin, I talked about, he'll have an opportunity. If he wins the Egg Bowl, he'll get the 10 wins. Mike Leach, I had him on the hot seat this year. I thought he'd be fired by the end of the year, and he's at 7-4. He's exceeded expectations. Jimbo had the nice rally after losing the 2 games with bad quarterback play. That Calzada settles in. They beat Alabama. And then Auburn, I mean, look, they got the 6 wins, but no point in prettying it up. Brian Harson's been disappointing these last couple of weeks with some of his coaching decisions and the collapse against Mississippi State. And then, of course, Sam Pittman's done a phenomenal job at Arkansas weathering the storm. We knew they were playing the toughest schedule in the country, and they're at 7-4 with an opportunity to beat Mizzou and go 8-4. So I think you really like where the SEC is at. And, man, it becomes scary, because what if LSU and Florida both hit home run hires for their head coaches? Man, somebody's got to lose, right? Like, somebody's got to be bad. We know Vandy's bad, and Clark Lee's facing an impossible challenge there. But, man, it just becomes down the road, one of these good coaches that we really like is going to lose his job in 2 years because you're playing the SEC. It's tough.
Chris Gordy, Locked On SEC podcast, our guest here on 3 and Out. Chris, appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Anytime, guys. And I think Ben should throw his name into the hat for the Florida head coaching job. He'd get my vote.
We appreciate it. Chris Gordy joining us here. Ben, are you going to denounce interest in that right now here on the show?
Hold on. I want to make sure. What did Chris say again? I want to make sure I heard him correctly.
He said he wants you to put, is Ben going to put his name in for the Florida coaching job? He said you would have his vote.
Listen, I'll take the money. I don't want the responsibility. I will take the contract, and I want to see what my buyout is. I want to make sure if I quit, Kevin, right, I'll be the first go. Listen, I'm going to do the Josh McDaniels. I'm going to take the job, go there, don't take the job, and come right back to ESPN Coastal and make sure my buyout is legit. Listen, I'm losing my hair already, man. I'm trying to keep the little bit I got. I'm not going no Florida. I love it. I love it too much, and I want to stay in the good graces of this fan base.
Ben would be the first coach in college football history not to watch the game.
Absolutely.
We coach them Monday through Friday. Saturday comes, somebody else runs out there. Ben's in the locker room. It's like, Well, from what I heard, it looked like they did pretty
I'll
well
have
today.
a press conference, and it will be, and they'll send out my representative saying, "Ben has decided not to move on from this." BJ, I'm not dealing with that, man. Pressure is a real thing, man, and I'm not dealing with that.
We'll come back. We'll chat with Josh Pate, 247 Sports. He'll join us next here on 3 and Out. College football getting right down to it here. It's rivalry week. This week, we've got championship games coming up in 2 weeks. And, of course, the playoff committee's got their work cut out for them, as well as the coaching carousel is just in full spin. Joining us here to talk about it from 247 Sports, CBS Sports, and host of The Late Kick with Josh Pate. Josh Pate joins us here on 3 and Out. Josh, welcome to the show. How are you?
I am good. I am employed, unlike most of college football coaches right now, so I guess I can't complain about anything.
That's 100% true. Dan Mullen is out at Florida. We talked about that here throughout the show. How attractive is that job? And certainly when you look at LSU is open, Southern Cal is open, rumors about maybe Brian Harsin wandering eyes up to the Northwest. I mean, you could have a number of big-time gigs, but there's already 3 kind of primo college football jobs open. Are there enough kind of big-time coaches to fill those?
Well, if by big time you define it as the guy who's going to be a splash hire the moment he's announced, no, there certainly are not those grand slam candidates out there. However, you know, we've seen in the past, I go back to Ohio State, for example, when Urban Meyer steps down there and you think to yourself, wow, this is going to be a big-time national search, and all the available names are going to be in the mix, and then all of a sudden they hire Ryan Day and never even had to leave the building to find the guy. And I remember what the take was. The take was nationally, wow, they could have had anyone they wanted. Why did they go with Ryan Day? But internally, the folks in Columbus were supremely confident in saying, why would we have left here? We knew we had the guy. Just because you've never heard of him doesn't mean he's not the right guy. And I say that to say, I wonder what the critical factors are. Because you define those before you start a search. You don't do it in reverse order, like some programs have done in the past. You define the characteristics you want in your ideal candidate. LSU's got to do it. Florida's got to do it. And sometimes maybe the guys who fit those criteria the best happen to be the hottest names. Or it may be that there's a guy who's on your radar, a little bit off your radar, or you've never heard of before that fits it. I just wonder if that's where we'll end up with this. Because I'll say, for any opening right now, I love Dave Aranda. I mean, I'm really enamored with Dave Aranda. There's a thought out there that, well, I don't know if he's a great recruiter. And more or less, that's something someone just said one day that no one's really validated because you've never really seen a big enough sample size. So that's just one example of the things that have to be parsed through. I think Billy Napier would be a really good fit here. But I'm very interested to see if the Florida powers that be believe in that mantra that some people do believe in down there, and that is, it's not just that we go get a winner. There's a style that we want to play with. There's a way that we want to win, and it looks a lot more like Steve Spurrier than, let's say, Jim McElwain in the past.
Is there a chance, Josh, that Florida and LSU, say, could get into a bidding war over the same candidate or two? I mean, could you see a situation like that in the SEC?
Yeah, I think there is. And it's obviously not helped by the fact that the same guy represents a lot of these candidates. And what gets really interesting, you know, with the LSU side of things is I've talked to some people that have firsthand knowledge of that search, and they'll tell you they are exclusively vetting Jimmy Sexton clients. Now, that may or may not make sense to you. When you get into the world of how this whole coaching search thing works a little bit, it makes a little more sense. I don't know if that's the best thing for the game overall, but it could be. Yes, it could very well come down to that. I'll tell you, the thing about Napier at Louisiana that's really interesting to watch is I think he had ECU if he really wanted it. I think that's going to go to Sonny Dykes, but I think Napier could have had that job. But when you start realizing, as he did, and his representation did, that this Florida job may come open, he tried to slow play that thing as best he could. And it's now open. I mean, Billy Napier would take that job if offered in a heartbeat. And I think there is some mutual interest there. Conversely, on the LSU side of things, there are some people who are really taking a hard line against that. I think more for optics' sake than anything else. They just don't want to have to say, we went to Louisiana Lafayette to get our new head coach. In reality, that shouldn't matter. A winner is a winner. The right guy is the right guy. So that's where things get a little muddy on that whole question.
Gosh, I mean, I saw what you said about Scott Strickland, and, you know, obviously with Florida throwing their hat in the ring, it makes everything different, even if you are LSU, even if you are Virginia Tech, even if you are USC. But how much of a perception hire is it as well? You want to go out there and get the guy, but you can't just get it because you got to try to, you know, satisfy the fans as well as satisfy the public perception? How does one do both without sacrificing the program at large?
Well, what I would have done is before I made a move on Mullen, I would have met, not with every fan, you can't do that, but I would have met with everyone whose endorsement I need on this, my higher level boosters, my board of trustees members, etc. And I would have said, I'm going to make a move on Mullen, but I'm only making it if you guys agree with the way we go about the subsequent search. Here is the way I want to do it. Here are the parameters. Here are my guidelines. Here are the focal points, characteristics, critical factors, however you want to phrase it. Do you agree that this is the way we will go about this? If they say no, then I'm probably not making a move on Dan Mullen. If they sign off on it, then I am no longer worried about appeasing people because I got their endorsement. And so now I'm going to run my coaching search. And if I find the guy who fits the most of those parameters, I don't really care if he's going to win me a press conference. I care that he wins games. And so, I remember when Dabo Swinney took that Clemson job, no one remembers that press conference. It wasn't very memorable. They remember him winning multiple championships. And that's where my head would be. I'm not looking to, win headlines. I'm looking to win games.
Josh Pate, host of The Late Kick with Josh Pate, joining us here on 3 and Out. And Josh, obviously coaching rumors out there. You have certainly Brian Harsin. Could he go back to the Northwest? You look at Shane Beamer at South Carolina. A lot of rumors there with Virginia Tech. Could we actually see coaches leave the SEC for other jobs? That's usually not the way it works.
I'd be very, very surprised if Shane Beamer moved. So I'll put that one out there. That would stun me. Harsin would not stun me. It would still surprise me if he were to leave Auburn after 1 year. Now, I'll say this. I think there is interest there. Maybe there's mutual interest. I certainly think there's at least a passing interest in Brian Harsin's side of the equation on being drawn back to the Pacific Northwest, the West Coast, etc. I don't even think that he is fully steadfast in the concept of leaving Auburn after 1 year. That could always change, obviously, but, we're sitting here talking right now on this Monday, the 22nd of November. I would be mildly surprised if that one were to happen. I'd be stunned if Beamer moved. I'd be still mildly surprised if Harsin voluntarily moved on.
Josh, looking at the college football playoff, we've seen contenders lose. Is it lining up to where Cincinnati, they're just going to have to be in whether the committee likes it or not? Are we seeing a situation where that could arise?
I think the perception of the committee not wanting a G5 team in has always been a little overblown, only because I can speak firsthand. I don't have a hardline anti-G5 stance myself, but yet I've also never thought that a G5 team belonged in. So some would look at me and say, you're anti-G5. No, it's that I've got criteria. They've defined their criteria, and I don't think a G5 team to this point has met it. Now, we may be looking at the first ever G5 team to do that. I think the toughest Cincinnati to do, other than winning the rest of their games, they got 2 of them left, is going to be if you got a 12-1 Oklahoma State, Big 12 champ Oklahoma State, how do they compare? If it were to come down to an either or, and there's not room for both, how do they compare those 2 resumes? And then also the other fun one is Alabama at 2 losses. If that second loss is a really razor-thin margin against Georgia, there's a train of thought out there, and people aren't wrong when they say this. Technically, they would say, well, if Georgia's number 1 and Bama's number 2 and number 3, they barely lose to number 1. Doesn't that validate that they're number 2 or number 3? So that's one train of thought. The other train of thought is, yeah, but it's a resume contest. It's a merit contest. You lost 2 games. You don't get in. You didn't win your conference, etc. I don't know where I'll fall on that yet. I've got to see the games play out, to be honest, before even knowing where I personally would fall on that.
The wrong way. I mean, I understand that 4 kind of makes you look at this year and how Georgia is the clear-cut number 1, and then it gets a little murky with 2, 3, 4, and definitely 5. Do you think if they go to a 6, 8, or maybe even 12 team expansion, we're gonna be getting teams that maybe are very mediocre but still get a chance to play for it all?
Well, I'll put it to you like this: watch Oregon get pasted by Utah the other night, just like I did. In a 12-team format, that Oregon team's probably still in the mix for a playoff spot. I want nothing to do with that. I have no interest whatsoever in watching a format where I'm going up to Ann Arbor, Michigan Saturday to watch this Ohio State-Michigan game. I have no interest in going up there to watch those two play for seeding. That is a game where we know going in the loser is out of this thing. That's why it's so consequential. That's why you and I and everyone else are going to make sure to watch the game, because there's no safety net under the game. You can't afford to fall this late in the year. I don't think there's ever a perfect formula like you asked, but I also feel like this. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I don't think it's the end of the world if someone's mad at the end of a season. Like, we got this tendency where if anyone's mad or complaining, you automatically think something has to be fixed. I've never felt that way. If you're mad, there's probably something your team could have done that they failed to do to secure a spot. And so just do better next year. It's not the worst thing in the world.
Josh, that being said, do you expect, given what you kind of talked about, your criteria, what the playoff committee has shown, that this week we're talking about a top 4 matchup with Ohio State and Michigan?
Yes, I do. I actually do think Michigan, by a pretty slim margin, is going to be boosted up to that number 4 spot. One of the sentences I cannot stand in this whole process is "it'll work itself out," but I'm going to say it. It will work itself out. So it doesn't really matter for Cincinnati, because obviously those two are going to play each other this weekend. I mean, think about this, though. This is what really angers people. If you go 50,000 feet, you look at number 4 and number 3, Ohio State, Michigan. Like, they're about to play each other and knock one of them out. Number 2 and number 1, or number 3 and number 1, depending on how it shakes out, Alabama, Georgia, they're going to have to play each other. The 50,000-foot argument is folks look at Cincinnati and say, the only difference is they don't have to be put in that kind of position. Because if they were, we think they'd lose too. And I've always understood that argument. So to go back 2 questions ago, I guess there's no perfect way, but I like this way as opposed to the other models people present me.
And Josh, finally, I know you said you're gonna be watching that Michigan Ohio State game. Who's your Heisman front runner right now? C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young?
I got to see C.J. Stroud up close and in person this past Saturday. I've seen Bryce play a few times in person. Man, I think whatever's going to decide that thing is still to come. So right now, I mean, I would very slightly lean C.J. Stroud. I would not argue with you at all if you told me it should be Bryce Young instead. I would love to see Will Anderson for Alabama having a dominant performance down the stretch somewhere. But I think with Stroud going to Michigan Saturday and potentially a Big Ten title game, with the fact that no Bryce Young has still got to play the University of Georgia, that's going to be a show. So I think whatever's going to decide it is still in the windshield instead of the rearview mirror.
Josh Pate, host of The Late Kick with Josh Pate, joining us here on 3 and Out. And you also catch Josh 247 Sports at CBS Sports. Josh Pate, our guest here on 3 and Out. Josh, appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Appreciate it, guys.
Josh Pate, our guest here on 3 and Out. If you look at all things college football, a lot of coaching things happening, a lot of college football playoff scenarios happening right in front of our eyes as well. We'll come back with more 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to chat with Chris Gordy and Josh Pate here this hour. A lot going on around college football. Certainly coaching vacancies out there. Dan Mullen out at Florida. So Florida becomes the latest opening there in college football. And you're hearing everybody from Lane Kiffin to Billy Napier, Mario Cristobal, and BJ and Ben. We talked about this earlier today, where what does Florida have going for it? Well, obviously they have to pay Dan Mullen $6 million in the next 30 days, and they're going to pay him $1 million for a year for the next 6 years. They're not worried about what they're paying the next guy. I think you go to certain situations, yeah, we want to coach, but we're not willing to go past this. I think Florida can simply look at it and say, how much is it going to take to get the guy we want? And they'll make it happen. And I think that obviously changes the game when you're talking about who the viable coaching options are for any given school.
Yeah, I don't think Florida's worried at all about costs. I think if they find their guy and that coach says, I want $8.5 million a year, if Florida believes that's their future, I think Florida will move forward with that and not even hesitate. We're talking about one of the elite jobs in college football. And I know so much of kind of the college football landscape in terms of perception has been dominated by the teams that have been in the playoff. You think about Alabama, you think about Ohio State, you think about Clemson. Florida is as good of a job as there is in college football. Absolutely, without question. And I think if Florida finds their candidate, with all due respect to LSU, with all due respect to SC, if there's mutual interest, I think Florida's a better job than LSU. Now, they're both elite. I mean, LSU and Florida are both tier 1 jobs, and I don't know if they have interest in the same candidates, but you can make an argument Florida's the best job in the country. To me, looking at the reported candidates that have been out there, I think if you could get Lane Kiffin just offensively, recruiting, they're in the top 10. Look at what Matt Corral's done. Look at what that – I think that would be about as good of a hire as you could have. I think Billy Napier would be a great hire. I've been stunned that his name hasn't been rumored to be in the mix for more jobs. I mean, look at what Louisiana's done. And, oh, by the way, they're hosting the Sun Belt Conference Championship game for all the talk about Coastal and App. That game's going to be in Lafayette coming up next Saturday, and Louisiana has just one loss. Since that loss to Texas, they've won out. So Napier's done a great job. He's coached under Dabo. He's coached under Saban. So he's, been right there at some of the better programs in college football, the dominant programs in college football. He's a former player, played quarterback at Furman. I think Napier would be a great hire for either Florida or LSU. But Ben, if you're Florida, you find who you want. You go interview that person. You offer them whatever it takes. This is the University of Florida we're talking about. I think anybody's in the mix, and I think this is one of the top jobs in college football.
I think you have to be aggressive. I think about something that Kevin said all the time when you talk about you get recruited by certain schools. Georgia doesn't recruit people. They say, man, you want to come to Georgia. Like, you don't recruit them. I think what happens is with Scott Strictly, he kind of got to take the Jared Binko approach, athletic director at Georgia Southern. Stop acting like you ain't got Florida behind you. Like, sometimes, you talk about doing stuff, people go, hey, man, what's the one thing you have at Florida that most teams don't have? You have leverage. You have money to spend, and you decide who you giving it to. BJ, you talk about Billy Napier. You know what boosts his resume, make the whole world figure out who he is? Make him become the head coach of Florida. Then you go, oh, okay, I can see what's going on now at Louisiana. Because this is the one thing people ain't talk about. If Florida would have played Louisiana this year, Florida would have probably been the favorite because they're Florida, not because they're a better team than Louisiana right now. So for me, I do think you got like Lane Kiffin. That's the sexy hire. That's the one that you don't got to introduce him. Billy Napier is a guy who, like you say, he has ties. Louisiana, obviously, he knows how to recruit. Throughout the Sun Belt region, you can't recruit. If you can't recruit in the Southeast, you do not deserve to be a head coach. But I go back to something you said, BJ. It is the University of Florida, and you bigger than the money, because you can offer the money. You got to look at them and say, can you handle it? Because, see, that's something that we don't talk about a lot, right? The one thing Dan Mullen just proved that, man, it's rough when you at an elite school. That doesn't mean you're a part of a school that's a part of the college football fabric. Florida, Georgia, LSU, Georgia Tech, Miami, college football fabric school. So when you don't get it done there, everybody knows. I mean, so I ain't taking nothing away from Virginia Tech or TCU or Washington or Washington State. No one cares. When Washington makes their hire, it's going to be on national news because it has to be, not because nationally people care. And that's taking nothing away, from Washington State or UW and things of that nature. So I do think that it's not about the candidate that you want. It's you got to ask your candidate certain things. Hey, man, we know you want the money. The money's over there. We got that part. Man, can you take us to 10 wins, 11 wins? Because the thing about Dan Mullen, the people don't get, he went from 9 to 10. He's doing it. And then fell off a cliff. I go back to Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer did not, let me say this correctly. Hold on. Urban Meyer left because of his health. But he also saw what was coming. Ain't no T-Bones walking through that door. So if you could get the guys in there, plus BJ, keep Florida's going to be in the national conversation, good or bad, as you can see. There's nothing you can do about that. But are you here to keep us relevant, or are you here to take us to the next level? Because the one thing that Kirby Smart has done in Georgia, he's taking them to the next level. Now, they still got to finish the deal, but they're in the national conversation. So recruiting, you have to get it done. On the field, you have to get it done. You got to win the public perception war, and you got to be able to deal with the media. Like, that's your in-between. That's something that I don't think Dan Mullen did a better job at. Listen, losing is when you build friends. When we used to lose, I'd be like, hey, Miss Cassidy Hill, Mr. Buddy Martin, Mr. Kevin Thomas, Mr. BJ Bennett. Listen, man, could you take it easy on me a little bit, man? Can I talk to you for a second? Because I know you got the right stories, right? I get it. But, I know on SouthernPigskin.com, I like what you wrote, man. That was real nice. But that's something that Dan Mullen didn't do well. But at the end of the day, let me tell y'all something. I don't feel sorry for Dan Mullen, because in college football, talking about amateurism, you get paid to leave. They're giving him $6 million in the next 30 or 60 months, Kevin, 60 months. I mean, the next 2 months, and he gets $1 million a year. That's before he even gets another job. That's guaranteed. I'm getting $12 million before I even get another job. So I do agree. It's not about the best candidate. It's, do you got a guy that's here for the long haul? Because people thought that Vanderbilt was only giving people 4 years. Well, since Steve Spurrier, when the last time Florida gave somebody more than 4 or 5? It's been 4 or 5 out the door, 4 or 5 out the door. Now, Urban Meyer, he left, and they told Ron Zook to get the hell out of here because he lost to Mississippi State. But BJ and Kevin, I asked this. It's not that you don't want to coach at Florida. Can you handle it? Because I'm telling you, that heat is serious. It's only going to go up. And we talking about adding Texas and Oklahoma. Man, the narrative is already there. The expectations are already set in stone. Can you handle both? And if you can, hey, man, sign your name on the dotted line, because you already know they coming for you, me included. I'm coming too. So is my mama. So is Florida Gator, faithful. But if you're the right guy for the job, and like you said, BJ, I think what makes it the premier coaching position, you don't lack anything. Resources, coaches, you got the best of everything, but now you got to go out there and get them W's.
Again, I think it's going to be very interesting to see where they go. And again, BJ, you have 3 kind of really what I would consider marquee coaching jobs, 2 in the SEC with Florida and LSU, and Southern Cal. And again, you could say what you want about any of those, but those are 3 what many people consider destination jobs. Like, those set you up for the rest of your coaching life in terms of the contract you get, the prestige you could potentially get, the ability to go out and win and compete for conference and national championships there. And you have 3 of them open at the same time.
Do you have those openings, but you have the early signing period on the horizon. In time, put a class together.
Yeah, I mean, it's good. Again, I think where he's going with that is going to be very interesting to see where these teams go quickly to get a coach name, because you've got about 3.5 weeks until that early signing period is going to have to be underway. And you have to have somebody. You can't go in, hey, I'm new here. Oh, you missed out. You didn't sign anybody early? Nope, that's not going to fly at those locations. We got more to come here. It's 3 and Out, the Southern Pigskin Radio Network. Good to have you here on this Monday. Again, one more day to wait until the new college football playoff poll comes out. And a lot of talk about how it's going to look. I know BJ will see what it looks like. But Cincinnati, a lot of folks, I know we just chatted with Josh Pate, who said, look, he didn't think Cincinnati deserved to be in. And I know there's a lot of argument either way on that. But where do you think Cincinnati's going to be after you have Oregon just get eviscerated over the weekend?
They'll be fifth. They'll be fifth because, Kevin, like you said, if you move Cincinnati to fourth, it then becomes very difficult to move them back out if you need to do that or if you feel like you should do that. I think they'll be fifth. I do.
They're going to be fifth, Kevin. You know it, and I know it. And the thing about Cincinnati is, I mean, like I said, they're winning everything but the public perception battle, and that is one of the hardest things to – well, the second hardest thing. Second hardest thing is the public perception. The first thing, BJ and Kevin, is the benefit of the doubt. They have not earned it. Because Coastal Carolina, they came and went. UCF, they came and went. Cincinnati didn't come and go, but they're going to make sure they don't come this time because they're going to be like, hey, man, y'all going to be in number 5. Congratulations on the great season. We don't think you fit to be one of the last 4 teams standing.
Yeah, going to be interesting to see where they come out with it. Again, Alabama has been at 2, as we said, depending on how you view that. Ohio State was very impressive. Oregon lost. Does Michigan jump up? How far does Oklahoma State jump up with just 1 loss? And Wisconsin only has 1 loss at this point. So very interesting to see what this committee does here coming down the stretch of the season with the rivalry week this week, conference championship games next week. Appreciate Josh Pate, Chris Gordy joining us here. Also, David Waters and Brooks Austin on this Monday. If you missed any portion of the show, ESPNCoastal.com. You can also go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube page, get a podcasted version of the show each and every day if you missed it. We'll see you tomorrow, Tuesday edition of 3 and Out on the Southern Pigskin Radio Network.